The twin suns of Ultrix 9 glared down with all the warmth and hospitality of a tax collector on collection day. Rayner wiped the sweat from his brow, squinting at the horizon where the rusty-colored landscape seemed to shimmer and dance in the heat. His ship, the Cosmic Mule, as he'd affectionately named it, sat behind him, smoking for what he optimistically called a minor technical disagreement with its primary thruster. "Just my luck," he muttered to himself, kicking a pebble that scuttled across the barren ground like it couldn't wait to get away from him. Navigation system decides to take a break right when we're passing through a restricted zone. Fantastic. The warning had been clear enough, suggested course deviation. Vultrix's system under diplomatic restriction. But Rayner, with the wisdom of a man who routinely confused courage with caffeine deficiency, had ignored it. After all, he was only 3 jumps away from Stellarport Station and their supposedly legendary coffee. A little detour through a diplomatically sensitive area seemed a small price to pay. His handheld scanner beeped pathetically, struggling to analyze the atmosphere. Rayner tapped it against his palm, the universal fix for temperamental technology, and frowned at the readings. Breathable, barely, like sucking air through a straw stuffed with cotton. He tucked the scanner into his jacket pocket and addressed the small drone hovering nervously at his shoulder. "Blip, run a diagnostics check on the ship. I'm going to see if there's anything resembling civilization around here." The drone, a round metallic ball with a single blue eye, beeped in what Rayner interpreted as reluctant agreement. "And don't give me that attitude," he added, pointing a finger at the drone. "One of us has to stay with the ship, and you don't have legs." Blip's eye dimmed slightly in what could only be described as mechanical resignation. Rayner trudged across the rocky terrain, his boots kicking up dust that seemed determined to find its way into every crevice of his clothing. Occasional alien insects, if you could call something with 12 legs and 3 pincers an insect, scuttled away from his path. One particularly brave specimen, the size of Rayner's hand, stopped to wave its antennae at him menacingly. Yeah, I'm terrifying," Rayner told it. "Crashed spaceship, lost human, very scary. Go tell your friends." The creature seemed to consider this for a moment before retreating beneath a rock. After an hour of walking, just as Rayner was considering the nutritional value of the strange blue lichen growing on some of the rocks, the landscape began to change. The barren wasteland gave way to scattered structures, crude but effective shelters built from salvaged spacecraft parts and local materials. Lights flickered in windows, and somewhere in the distance, a sign blinked in a language Rayner couldn't read, but recognized as Galactic Standard Trade Script. Civilization, he breathed, quickening his pace. Or at least its distant cousin. The settlement was larger than it had first appeared. A collection of buildings arranged in no particular order, as if they'd been dropped from orbit and left where they landed. The central structure appeared to be a cantina, its entrance marked by a flickering holographic sign that alternated between Vultrix's rest stop and no weapons, no refunds. Rayner pushed open the door, immediately enveloped by the familiar sense of spilled alcohol, questionable cooking, and too many species sharing too little air. The cantina's interior was dimly lit, with scattered tables occupied by a variety of beings. Some he recognized, humanoid traders, a couple of Xerxian merchants with their distinctive green skin, while others were new to him, including something in the corner that seemed to be mostly tentacles happily slurping a drink through multiple straws. He approached the bar, where a four-armed bartender was simultaneously mixing a drink, cleaning a glass, counting credits, and scratching his chin. "What'll it be?" the bartender asked without looking up. "Information, hopefully," Rayner replied. "My ship took a dive about 5 clicks east of here. Need parts, maybe some fuel." The bartender's upper right hand paused in its glass cleaning. "Ship parts don't come cheap around here, stranger." "They never do," Rayner sighed, placing a few credit chips on the counter. "But I'm good for it." Before the bartender could respond, the cantina's ambient chatter abruptly died. Rayner felt the atmosphere shift like the air before a storm. He turned slowly, following the collective gaze of the patrons. A woman had entered, tall, with skin the color of burnished copper and hair that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways. Her outfit was simple, but made from materials that screamed wealth and status. Flanking her were two figures in sleek armor, their faces obscured by helmets that revealed nothing but a thin visor, glowing with soft blue light. The woman surveyed the room with casual authority, her eyes eventually settling on Raynor with an intensity that made him want to check if his jacket was zipped properly. A newcomer, she observed, her voice carrying easily in the silence. How interesting. Raynor, never one to let intimidation get in the way of a potential solution to his problems, offered his most disarming smile. Just passing through. Or trying to. Ship troubles. The woman approached, her guards maintaining a precise distance behind her. Up close, Raynor noticed the subtle shimmer beneath her skin, like circuits running just below the surface. Definitely not human, though humanoid enough. Ship troubles, she repeated, as if tasting the words. In a restricted zone? That's either very unfortunate or very foolish. I've been called worse than foolish, Raynor replied with a shrug. Usually by people trying to kill me. So this is actually a step up. Something flickered across the woman's face. Amusement, perhaps. I'm Elria. This settlement falls under my jurisdiction. Raynor, he replied, extending a hand before realizing it might not be the right protocol. He awkwardly converted the gesture into a vague wave. Pilot, trader, occasional delivery guy, full-time victim of mechanical betrayal. Elria studied him with unnerving intensity, as if attempting to read something written in microscopic text on his forehead. Finally, she said, your ship. What exactly is wrong with it? Thruster malfunction. Navigation system decided to retire early, and the fuel regulator is making a noise that I'm pretty sure translates to prepare for death in machine language. I see. Elria turned to one of her guards, speaking in a language that sounded like wind chimes and static. The guard nodded once and stepped back. Returning her attention to Raynor, she said, I can help you with your ship. My people have access to technology that should make repairs relatively simple. Raynor blinked in surprise. That's incredibly generous. What's the catch? The catch, as you put it, is that you will accompany me to another location first. I require an outsider's assistance with a matter of some delicacy. The entire cantina seemed to be holding its breath. Raynor weighed his options, which were essentially, accept the mysterious offer from the intimidating woman with armed guards, or stay stranded on a planet where the most advanced technology appeared to be the neon sign outside. When you put it that way, he said with a grin that he hoped concealed his apprehension, how could I possibly refuse? Elria's transport was nothing like the rusted, salvaged vehicles Raynor had spotted around the settlement. Sleek and silver, it hovered above the ground with barely a sound, its hull unmarked by dust or debris despite the harsh environment. Nice ride, Raynor remarked as one of the guards gestured for him to enter. Much classier than my ship, even when mine isn't smoking like a faulty kitchen appliance. Elria didn't respond, simply taking a seat across from him as the transport's door sealed shut with a soft hiss. The interior was surprisingly spacious, with smooth curves and subtle lighting that shifted color in response to their movements. As the transport lifted off, Raynor caught a glimpse of the settlement rapidly shrinking below. They were ascending much higher than he'd expected, breaking through the planet's upper atmosphere in minutes rather than hours. So, he ventured, this jurisdiction of yours. It's a bit more extensive than just that little outpost, isn't it? Elria regarded him with something approaching amusement. You could say that. The transport's windows automatically tinted as they left the atmosphere entirely, emerging into space. Raynor pressed his face against the glass, taking in the view, and froze. Before them hung an enormous structure, a space station unlike any he'd ever seen. It resembled a massive, ornate snowflake, with crystalline spires extending in geometrically perfect patterns. Lights pulsed along its surface like heartbeats, and smaller craft moved around it in careful, choreographed orbits. That's Raynor found himself uncharacteristically at a loss for words. "The royal citadel of Myrene," Elria supplied. "My home." The transport glided toward the station, seamlessly joining the pattern of vessels circling it. As they approached, Raynor noticed a section of the structure shifting, opening like the petals of a flower to admit them. "Wait," he said slowly, pieces falling into place. "Royal Citadel? Your home? Are you?" Queen Elria Onyxoris Valoran, sovereign of the Myrene Dominion, protector of the Seven Systems, and guardian of the eternal flame, recited one of the guards, speaking for the first time. Raynor blinked, then looked at Elria with new eyes. "So, when you said jurisdiction, I was being modest," she replied with the faintest hint of a smile. "And I've been talking to you like," he winced, mentally replaying their conversation. "Oh boy, like a human addressing another being," Elria finished for him. It was refreshing. The transport docked with a gentle bump, and the door slid open to reveal a reception that made the Cantina's reaction to Elria seem positively underwhelming. Rows of guards stood at attention, their armor more elaborate than those of Elria's personal escort. Beyond them, officials in flowing garments waited with perfectly composed expressions. "Welcome to the Citadel," Elria said, rising gracefully. "Try not to break anything irreplaceable." Raynor followed her out, acutely aware of the stares directed his way, some curious, others openly hostile. "No promises," he muttered. "My specialty is making memorable first impressions, usually by accident." The procession moved through corridors that seemed to be grown rather than built, with walls that subtly shifted in color and texture. Raynor tried to maintain some dignity despite his dusty clothes and the lingering smell of ship exhaust that he was certain clung to him. They entered what could only be described as a throne room, though it bore little resemblance to the gaudy, imposing chambers Raynor had seen in historical vids. This space was open and airy, with a ceiling that somehow appeared to contain actual clouds and distant stars. The throne itself was a simple, elegant structure that seemed to grow from the floor, its surface inlaid with circuits that pulsed with soft light. As Elria approached it, the officials and guards dropped to one knee in perfect unison. Raynor, a beat late, awkwardly followed suit. "Rise," Elria commanded, taking her seat. The assembled court stood, though Raynor noticed he received several subtle glares for his clumsy attempt at protocol. A tall, severe-looking official stepped forward, his robes shimmering with embedded technology. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice carrying an undertone of disapproval, "the Vaesir Dominion representatives await your response to their proposal." "They will continue to wait, Counselor Varen," Elria replied smoothly. "I require more information before making any decision." Varen's eyes flickered to Raynor. "And this visitor? Is he part of your information gathering?" In a manner of speaking, Elria said, "Raynor will be assisting me with a personal project. In return, we will repair his ship." Murmurs rippled through the court. Varen's expression remained neutral, but Raynor didn't miss the flash of calculation in his eyes. "As you wish, Your Majesty," Varen said with a slight bow. "However, I must remind you that security protocols are at my discretion," Elria interrupted, her tone still pleasant, but with an unmistakable edge of steel. "Now, I believe we have matters to discuss in private. Raynor, you will be shown to quarters where you can rest, and perhaps avail yourself of our cleansing facilities." Raynor caught the hint and nodded, trying not to look too relieved at the prospect of a shower. "Thank you, Your Majesty." As a guard led him away, Raynor caught snippets of the conversation resuming behind him, something about border patrols, diplomatic tensions, and reports of unusual activity in the outer systems. Nothing that made much sense without context, but enough to confirm his suspicion that he'd landed himself in the middle of something far more complex than a simple repair job. The guest quarters were more luxurious than any accommodation Raynor had experienced in years, possibly ever. The cleansing facility turned out to be a bathroom with water that adjusted to his preferred temperature without him having to say a word, and clothing had been provided that actually fit him despite his above-average height. Not bad for a prison cell, he remarked to himself, examining the room's details. Despite the comfort, he harbored no illusions. He was as much a guest as he was a potential security risk, and the door, while not visibly locked, probably wouldn't open if he tried to wander. His suspicions were confirmed when he approached the door, and a soft voice emanated from nowhere in particular. Queen Elria has requested that guests remain in their assigned quarters unless escorted. Just checking the acoustics, Rayner replied smoothly, stepping back from the door. Excellent room resonance, by the way. He spent the next hour exploring what he could, finding nothing particularly revealing beyond the general sense that Myrene technology was significantly advanced beyond what he typically encountered in his travels. The furniture responded to his preferences, the lighting adjusted to his circadian rhythm, and even the art on the walls subtly shifted to display scenes that seemed calibrated to his psychological profile. Creepy, but impressive, he muttered, watching as a landscape morphed from rocky mountains to lush forest, apparently responding to his subconscious preferences. A chime at the door interrupted his exploration. It slid open to reveal not a guard but Elria herself, now dressed in less formal attire though still unmistakably regal. "Your Majesty," Rayner said, attempting a bow that probably looked more like he was checking if his shoes were tied. "This is unexpected. I prefer to personally assess those who enter my domain," she replied, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. The door closed behind her. "And what's your assessment so far?" Rayner asked, trying to sound casual despite the sudden tension in the air. Elria moved around the room, trailing her fingers along surfaces as if reading them. "You're either remarkably fortunate or remarkably foolish. Possibly both. Your ship's malfunction was genuine, but your presence in a restricted zone raises questions. Like I said, navigation system failure. Complete coincidence." "There are very few coincidences in my experience," Elria said, fixing him with that penetrating gaze again, "especially when they involve unregistered ships in areas of political sensitivity." Rayner maintained his most innocent expression. "Look, I'm just a freelance trader trying to make a living. Politics is way above my pay grade." Elria's attention shifted to a small object she'd picked up from a side table, a decorative sculpture that had caught Rayner's eye earlier. She turned it in her hands, studying it from different angles. "Do you know what this represents?" "Art appreciation wasn't covered in my survival and Outer Rim territories training," Rayner admitted. "It's the Falter Ion incident," she said. "A moment in our history when a single decision changed the course of our civilization. One person, acting on instinct rather than protocol, saved thousands." She set the sculpture down carefully. "Sometimes outsiders bring perspectives we cannot see from within. That is why I brought you here, Rayner. Not just to repair your ship. I'm flattered, but the Myrene Dominion is facing a crisis," Elria continued, cutting him off. "External pressure from the Vaesir Dominion. Internal dissent from factions who disagree with my policies. And now, evidence of treachery within my inner circle." Rayner shifted uncomfortably. "That sounds like a problem for your security forces, not a random guy who crashed nearby." "My security forces are part of the system I suspect has been compromised." Elria's expression hardened. "I need someone outside that system. Someone with no ties or loyalties to any faction. Someone expendable," Rayner translated. Elria didn't deny it. "Someone deniable," she corrected, "and potentially valuable precisely because they are underestimated." Before Rayner could respond, a subtle vibration ran through the room. Not enough to disturb anything, but noticeable. Elria frowned. "What is it?" Rayner asked. "A signal. Come with me." She moved to the door, which opened immediately at her approach. "There's something I need to show you." Elria led Rayner through corridors that grew progressively less ornate and more functional. They passed few people, and those they did encounter bowed deeply and averted their eyes. Eventually, they reached a section that had none of the organic, flowing design of the rest of the Citadel. Instead, it was all sharp angles and utilitarian purpose. "The historical archives," Elria explained as they approached a heavily secured door. "Few have access." She placed her hand on a panel beside the door, which scanned not just her palm, but seemed to look beneath it, tracing the unique pattern of her circulatory system. The door slid open silently. Inside was a vast chamber filled with what appeared to be suspended crystals, each containing shifting patterns of light. Along one wall stood a series of display cases containing physical artifacts, pieces of technology, documents, and objects Raynor couldn't identify. Elria moved purposefully toward one of these cases, keying in a code that caused the protective field around it to shimmer and vanish. She reached in and carefully extracted what looked like a tattered piece of fabric, faded orange, with what might once have been a symbol or logo still barely visible. "This was found with me," she said quietly, "when I was discovered as a child, injured and alone, on the outer moon of Saren. The day I was brought to the royal house of Myrene, where it was confirmed I carried the bloodline of the dynasty." Raynor stepped closer, studying the fabric. Something about it tugged at his memory, but he couldn't place it. "You were lost?" "As a child." Elria nodded, her fingers tracing the fabric's worn edges. "There was an attempt on the royal family. My birth parents sent me away for safety, but the transport was attacked. The official record states that a local found me and brought me to authorities." She looked up at Raynor, her eyes searching his face. "But I've always had fragments of memory. Someone helping me. Someone not from our world." Raynor felt a strange chill. The fabric, the story, they hovered at the edge of familiarity like a word on the tip of his tongue. Before he could respond, an alarm sounded, subtle but unmistakable. Elria immediately returned the fabric to its case, the protective field reactivating. "We must go," she said, her manner shifting instantly from contemplative to commanding. "That's a security alert." They hurried back through the corridors, now noticeably emptier. Elria led them not toward the throne room, but to what appeared to be a command center, where officials were gathered around holographic displays showing various parts of the Citadel. Counselor Varen was already there, issuing orders to security personnel. He turned as they entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Your Majesty," he said with a bow, "there's been an unauthorized access attempt to the secure archives. We're investigating now." "The historical archives?" Elria asked sharply. "No, Your Majesty. The Strategic Command Archives. Section 7. Elria's face betrayed nothing, but Raynor sensed her tension. "I see. And the status of our guests?" "The Vaser representatives remain in their quarters, under observation," Varen replied smoothly. No unusual activity detected. Raynor watched the exchange, noting the careful way information was being shared and what wasn't being said. The politics of a royal court, he was quickly discovering, made the haggling of frontier trading posts seem straightforward by comparison. "Counselor," Elria said after a moment, "I will be taking a short journey to the outer platform observation post. Recent events have reminded me of the importance of historical perspective." Varen's expression flickered briefly. Surprise, perhaps, or concern. "Is that wise, Your Majesty? With the current security situation, it is necessary," Elria interrupted, "and I will be taking our visitor with me. His expertise in ship systems may prove useful for the inspection I intend to conduct." Varen bowed, though Raynor didn't miss the calculating look directed his way. "As you wish, Your Majesty. Shall I arrange an escort?" "2 guards only," Elria replied. "This is a discreet mission." As they left the command center, Raynor leaned closer to Elria and whispered, "I'm guessing we're not actually going to an observation post?" Her lips curved in the ghost of a smile. "Your perceptiveness is improving." "No, we're going somewhere much more interesting and potentially dangerous." "Just checking," Raynor sighed, "because my day wasn't exciting enough already." This short journey, Elria had mentioned, turned out to involve boarding a small, agile craft designed for speed rather than comfort. With only Elria, Raynor, and 2 silent guards aboard, they detached from the Citadel and accelerated away from the main station. "Care to fill me in on where we're actually going?" Raynor asked as he watched the majestic structure recede behind them. "An old monitoring outpost," Elria replied, studying navigational data on a holographic display. "Officially decommissioned years ago, and unofficially converted to a secure data storage facility accessible only to the royal bloodline. She glanced at him. The alarm we heard wasn't coincidental. Someone is trying to access restricted information. Information that would confirm my suspicions about a traitor in my council. Let me guess, Rayner said. Tall guy. Fancy robes. Looks like he swallowed something sour about 20 years ago and never quite got over it. Elria's lips twitched. Counselor Varen has served the court for decades. His loyalty has never been questioned. Until now, Rayner observed. Until now, she agreed. The evidence is fragmentary, but it suggests he has been in contact with the Vaesir Dominion. Not merely diplomatic channels, but covert communications. And the Vaesir Dominion is not friendly. They are our oldest rivals, Elria explained. Recent diplomatic overtures suggested a thawing of relations, but intelligence reports indicate they may be positioning for a more aggressive stance. Rayner leaned back in his seat, processing. So your trusted advisor might be working with your enemies. Someone tried to hack your secret files, and you've decided the best response is to take a barely known outsider to your hidden bunker of classified information. When you phrase it that way, it does sound questionable, Elria admitted. But my options are limited. The court is a web of alliances and loyalties. You are an unknown factor, which makes you valuable. The outpost came into view, a small, angular structure floating in orbit around a barren moon. Unlike the elegant design of the Citadel, this facility was deliberately unremarkable, its exterior designed to deflect both attention and sensor scans. As they approached, Elria entered a series of commands into the navigation system. The outpost remained dark and apparently inactive. Is it supposed to be doing that? Rayner asked, pointing at the decidedly unwelcoming structure. No, Elria said, her expression grim. It should have recognized my ship's signature and activated automatically. One of the guards spoke up, his tone respectful but urgent. Your Majesty, I'm detecting residual energy signatures consistent with another vessel having docked recently. Someone beat us to it, Rayner concluded. Elria nodded, her jaw set in determination. We proceed with caution. If Varen's agents are already here, they may have accessed the data, or may still be attempting to do so. Their ship docked with a gentle thud, connecting to an airlock that reluctantly cycled open after Elria override several security protocols. The interior of the outpost was dimly lit by emergency lighting only, casting long shadows across utilitarian corridors. Homie, Rayner muttered as they moved forward, the guards taking positions ahead and behind them. You royals really know how to decorate a secret hideout. Function over form, Elria replied, her attention focused on a handheld device that appeared to be scanning their surroundings. This way, they navigated through the outpost, passing rooms filled with outdated monitoring equipment and storage units. Everything was coated in a fine layer of dust, except, Rayner noted, certain control panels and doorways where the dust had been disturbed recently. We're not the first visitors in a while, he whispered, pointing to a handprint clearly visible on a wall panel. Elria nodded grimly. The central data core is ahead. If they've reached it, a sudden noise from further down the corridor silenced her. One of the guards raised a weapon Rayner hadn't noticed before, sleek and deadly looking, with components that hummed with energy. Voices became audible, too, maybe 3 people speaking in hushed tones. Elria gestured for them to halt, then made a series of hand signals to the guards that Rayner couldn't interpret. The guards nodded and moved forward silently, separating to approach from different angles. Stay here, Elria whispered to Rayner, drawing a small device from her belt. Gladly, he replied, pressing himself against the wall. I left my getting shot at outfit on my ship. Elria moved forward cautiously, following the guards. Rayner held his position for approximately 3 seconds before curiosity got the better of him, and he crept after her, staying close to the wall. The corridor opened into a circular chamber dominated by a central column of what appeared to be crystalline technology, similar to the archives Rayner had seen in the Citadel, but more concentrated. Around this column stood 3 figures in dark uniforms, working at control panels with focused intensity. One of the guards made a slight noise, Deliberately, Rayner realized, and the intruders whirled around, drawing weapons. The ensuing exchange was brief but intense. Energy weapons discharged, filling the chamber with blinding light and the smell of ozone. One of Elria's guards went down, clutching his shoulder. Two of the intruders collapsed as well. The third, however, had managed to activate something on the central column. The crystalline structure had begun to pulse with increasing intensity, projections of data appearing in the air around it. "Stop," Elria commanded, stepping into the chamber with her weapon raised. Override code Nixorus 7 Alpha. The intruder turned, a woman with features similar to Elria's species, but harder, more angular. She smiled without warmth. "Your override codes have been temporarily adjusted, Your Majesty. Courtesy of friends in high places." "Vaser agent," Elria said coldly. "How did you gain access?" "You should be more careful about who you trust," the agent replied, her attention split between Elria and the still activating data core, especially those closest to you. The data projections were solidifying now, forming images and text in a language Rayner couldn't read. But one projection caught his eye, a recorded image of what appeared to be a small spacecraft crash site. The scene seemed oddly familiar. Elria had noticed it too, her expression changing from anger to shock. "That's your little secret," the agent finished for her. "The truth about the lost princess, found and returned. Except the official version is missing some interesting details." The recording continued, showing the aftermath of what must have been a violent attack. Among the debris, a small figure was visible, a child, bleeding and frightened. And approaching the child, another figure, this one clearly human. A human child, Rayner realized with a jolt of recognition. A boy in an orange emergency suit, the kind issued to junior cadets at the Frontier Training Academy. A boy with his face, younger, but unmistakably him. "That's not possible," he breathed, stepping forward without thinking. The agent turned, noticing him for the first time. Her eyes widened in surprise. "You?" She never finished the sentence. Elria had used the distraction to close the distance, bringing her weapon down on the agent's head with precise force. The Vaser operative crumpled to the floor. "We need to shut this down," Elria said urgently, moving to the control panel, "before it completes the data extraction." Rayner could barely focus, his eyes fixed on the recording still playing in the air before them. Memories were flooding back. A training expedition gone wrong, his cadet transport caught in an unexpected meteor shower. Emergency landing procedures, the other cadets evacuated while he had stubbornly gone back for something, and finding not his lost backpack, but an alien child, injured and alone. "I remember," he said softly. "I found you after your transport was attacked. I had no idea you were royalty or whatever. You were just a kid who needed help." Elria's hands paused on the controls. She looked back at him, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. "Wait, I remember now. You must be the one who saved me years ago." The moment hung between them, heavy with implication. Then reality reasserted itself as the remaining guard called out, "Your Majesty, the system is initiating a data transfer to an external location." Elria turned back to the console, fingers flying over controls. "I need to stop this. The data includes not just my personal history, but strategic information, security protocols." Rayner shook himself out of his daze. "Let me help. I may not understand your tech, but I know a thing or two about disrupting unwanted transmissions." He moved to her side, studying the interface. It was alien, but certain principles of technology were universal. "This looks like it's routing through multiple nodes to mask the destination. If we can't stop the transmission directly, maybe we can corrupt the data being sent." Elria looked at him sharply. "Ow! Signal overload," Rayner explained, pointing to what he guessed was a power regulation system. "Pump too much energy through the transmitter while it's active. The safeguard should kick in and cut the connection." "That could damage the core itself," the guard protested. "Better damaged than compromised," Elria decided. She made a series of adjustments, then looked at Rayner. "Ready?" He nodded, reaching for what appeared to be the primary power control. "On 3." 1-2. They activated the override simultaneously. The crystalline core flared with sudden, intense light, the projections around them distorting and fragmenting. A high-pitched whine filled the chamber, building to a painful intensity before cutting off abruptly as emergency systems engaged. The core went dark, the projections vanishing. Smoke curled from several panels. Did it work? Rayner asked into the sudden silence. Elria was already checking the systems. The transmission was interrupted. Some data was lost, but the core protected the most critical sections. She turned to him, a genuine smile breaking through her usually composed expression. Quick thinking. I've had some practice with emergency repairs, he replied with a shrug. Usually on my own ship, and usually after I've done something stupid to break it in the first place. The moment of levity passed quickly as Elria turned her attention to the Vaser agent and her unconscious companions. We need to secure them and return to the Citadel immediately. This confirms my suspicions. Varen must be the one who provided them access. And the recording? Rayner asked, gesturing to where the projection had been. That was really me? And you? Elria's expression softened. Yes, I've had fragments of memory from that day, but never the complete picture. When I saw your face in that cantina, something felt familiar. Now I know why. The journey back to the Citadel was tense and silent. Their small craft carried not only Elria, Rayner, and the surviving guard, but also 3 unconscious Vaser agents secured in the cargo hold. Rayner spent much of the trip staring out at the stars, trying to reconcile the flood of memories that had been unlocked by the recording. I was 16, he said eventually, breaking the silence. Junior cadet training expedition. Our transport got caught in that meteor shower and made an emergency landing. We were supposed to evacuate immediately, but I went back for my lucky compass. He laughed softly. Stupid reason to risk my life. Elria, who had been reviewing data on a portable screen, looked up. Not so stupid, it seems, since it led you to me. I found you in the wreckage of another ship. You were just a kid, couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. Bleeding scared. Rayner frowned, concentrating. I remember carrying you back to our evacuation point. The instructors were furious until they saw you. Then everything happened very fast. Medical teams, officials I didn't recognize. The Royal Guard. Elria supplied. They had been searching for me since the attack. They took you away. I was debriefed and sworn to secrecy about the alien child incident. Eventually, it all started to feel like a strange dream. He looked at her. I never knew what happened to you afterward. I was returned to the royal house, Elria said. Tests confirmed my identity. The lost heir miraculously found. There was extensive security around the incident. Your involvement was likely deliberately obscured to protect both of us. As the Citadel came into view, growing from a distant sparkle to its full, impressive size, Rayner felt the weight of their discovery alongside a growing sense of unease. So what happens now? He asked. We have Vaser agents, evidence of Varen's treachery, and a long-lost connection between us that someone tried very hard to keep buried. Elria's expression hardened into the regal mask he was becoming familiar with. Now we confront the traitor. But carefully. Varen has spent decades building his influence in the court. We need irrefutable evidence. Which we have, Rayner pointed out. Partial evidence, Elria corrected. Enough to act, but not enough to eliminate all of his allies and supporters. We need more. The craft docked smoothly with the Citadel, connecting to a different section than they had departed from. A secure area with significantly more guards present. As they disembarked, Elria issued rapid instructions, ensuring the Vaser agents were taken into custody with maximum security and minimum visibility. Come with me, she told Rayner once this was arranged. We need to examine what data we recovered before confronting Varen. They made their way through less traveled corridors, avoiding the main halls where court officials might be present. Rayner noticed that their path took them through areas that seemed older, with subtle differences in architecture and technology. The original sections of the Citadel, Elria explained when she caught his curious glances. Few remember these passages exist, which makes them useful in situations like ours. Eventually, they reached a small, unassuming chamber that showed no signs of the sophisticated technology Rayner had seen elsewhere. It appeared to be little more than a storage room, filled with containers of what looked like ordinary supplies. Elria approached the far wall and placed her palm against it. A section of the wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing a hidden doorway. "Impressive," Rayner commented. "Do all royals get secret hideouts? Or is it a special perk for queens only?" "A necessary precaution," Elria replied, though he caught the hint of amusement in her voice. "The security of the realm sometimes requires unconventional measures." The hidden room beyond was small, but well-equipped with technology that looked more advanced than even what Rayner had seen in the main sections of the Citadel. Elria activated a central console, and holographic displays sprang to life around them. "I recovered a portion of the data core's contents before we destroyed the connection," she explained, manipulating the displays with practiced gestures. Including this, one of the projections expanded, showing a series of communications logs. The language was unfamiliar to Rayner, but the patterns were clear enough: regular transmissions between a source within the Citadel and an external location. Varen's communications with the Vaesir Dominion, Elria confirmed. Encrypted, but the quantum signatures are unmistakable. She brought up another display, the partial recording from the outpost, showing young Rayner discovering the injured Elria. "And this, the full record of my recovery, including your involvement. A record that was supposedly lost years ago." "Why would Varen care about that?" Rayner asked, watching his younger self in the recording. "I mean, I get that he's been passing information to your enemies, but why does a rescue from 20 years ago matter?" Elria's expression grew thoughtful. "Because of what happened afterward. The attack that separated me from my parents wasn't random. It was an assassination attempt, the first of several aimed at eliminating our bloodline." She manipulated the controls again, bringing up historical records. 3 attempts in total. The last was 5 years ago, when my parents' shuttle exploded during a diplomatic mission, making me queen earlier than anyone expected. Rayner studied the information, understanding dawning. And Varen was involved in all of them. He was present during the planning of each trip or event where an attempt occurred, Elria confirmed. But that alone wasn't enough to implicate him. Too circumstantial. "But if he was also connected to the first attack, the one where I found you, it establishes a pattern spanning decades," Elria finished, "and explains why this record was supposedly destroyed. It contains data that could have revealed his involvement much earlier." Rayner leaned closer to the displays, scanning the information. "So we have communications proving he's working with the Vaesir Dominion now, and evidence suggesting he's been involved in assassination attempts for years. That should be enough, right?" Almost, Elria said. "But Varen is clever. He'll claim the communications were necessary diplomatic backchannels. Without the cipher key to decode the actual content, we can't prove what was discussed." She brought up yet another display, this one showing the complex internal structure of some kind of device. "This is what we need. The decryption module used for his communications. Standard protocol would have him keep it on his person at all times. So we need to get close enough to scan it or steal it," Rayner concluded, "without him realizing what we're doing." "Precisely." Elria deactivated the displays. "And I believe I know how to arrange that. The court is gathering for the evening assembly soon. Varen will be present, as will most of the potential conspirators." "Wait," Rayner said, holding up a hand. "You want to walk into a room full of people who might be working with the guy who's been trying to kill you for decades?" "Yes," Elria replied simply. "With you at my side, as my officially designated external consultant. Your unexpected presence will disrupt their usual patterns, making mistakes more likely." Rayner stared at her. "That's either brilliant or suicidal. I honestly can't tell which. Sometimes the line between the two is remarkably thin," Elria said with a small smile. "Now, we should prepare. You'll need more appropriate attire for a royal court." "This should be interesting," Rayner muttered. "From crash-landed traitor to royal spy in less than a day. Not how I expected this detour to go." The evening assembly was held in a grand hall that made the throne room look modest by comparison. Towering crystal pillars supported a ceiling that seemed to open directly into space, though Rayner suspected it was an elaborate projection rather than actual transparency. Court members in elaborate formal were moved through the space in patterns that seemed almost choreographed, forming and dissolving conversational groups with practiced ease. Rayner, now dressed in clothing that managed to be both comfortable and intimidatingly formal, felt distinctly out of place despite Elria's assurances that he looked the part of distinguished foreign advisor. Distinguished isn't usually in my top 10 descriptors, he had commented while examining his reflection earlier. Suspicious, disreputable, and occasionally charming, sure. Now, standing slightly behind Elria's right shoulder as she moved through the assembly, he was acutely aware of the attention they were attracting. Some courtiers merely glanced their way with polite curiosity, but others stared with open suspicion or hostility. "Your court doesn't seem thrilled about your new consultant," he murmured to Elria. "The Myrene court rarely approves of anything new," she replied quietly, "particularly when it arrives unannounced and disrupts established hierarchies." They continued their circuit of the room, Elria pausing occasionally to exchange formal greetings with officials. Rayner noticed she was carefully working her way toward a particular group near one of the hall's enormous windows, where Counselor Varen stood in conversation with several other senior-looking court members. As they approached, Varen looked up, his expression smoothing into perfect diplomatic neutrality. "Your Majesty," he said with a deep bow, "we were just discussing the situation with the Vaesir delegation. They seem unsettled by the delay in your response to their proposal." "The Vaesir representatives will need to cultivate patience," Elria replied coolly, "particularly given certain information that has recently come to light. Counselor Varen, I don't believe you've been formally introduced to Rayner, my new external security consultant." Varen's gaze shifted to Rayner, assessment and calculation evident behind his polite smile. "Indeed not. A pleasure to meet someone who has so quickly earned the Queen's confidence." "The pleasure's all mine," Rayner replied with his most disarming grin. "I've heard so much about you, Counselor." "All positive, I trust," Varen said, though his tone suggested he doubted this. "Oh, absolutely," Rayner assured him. "Your reputation definitely precedes you." Elria smoothly interjected before the veiled hostility could become more obvious. "Rayner brings valuable perspective on interstellar security protocols. In fact, he was just explaining a fascinating vulnerability in encrypted communication systems." Rayner picked up the cue without missing a beat. "Right, yes. It's quite technical, but essentially involves quantum resonance patterns in cipher modules." He gestured enthusiastically, using the movement to activate a small scanner concealed in his sleeve, a device Elria had provided precisely for this purpose. The signature can be detected at close range, making any transmission potentially traceable to its source. The scanner vibrated subtly against his wrist, confirming it had found and recorded its target, the encryption module Varen carried. Varen's expression remained pleasant, but Rayner didn't miss the slight tension that appeared around his eyes. "Fascinating indeed. Though I imagine such vulnerabilities are primarily theoretical rather than practical concerns." "You'd be surprised," Rayner replied cheerfully. "The practical applications are quite revealing." Before Varen could respond, a chime sounded throughout the hall, signaling the beginning of the formal proceedings. Elria inclined her head slightly. "If you'll excuse us, Counselor. Duty calls." As they moved away, Rayner leaned closer to murmur, "Got it. The scanner worked perfectly." "Excellent," Elria replied, her expression betraying nothing. "Now comes the more challenging part." The formal assembly proceeded with the rigid protocol Rayner was coming to expect from the Myrene court. Elria took her place on the throne, with various counselors and officials arranged in precise positions reflecting their rank and function. Rayner was directed to a spot that clearly wasn't normally occupied, drawing curious glances from throughout the assembly. Varen, as chief counselor, stood at Elria's right hand, addressing the court on various matters of state. Rayner had to admire the man's composure. If he suspected anything about their earlier mission or the scanner, he showed no sign of it. As the proceedings continued, Raynor surreptitiously studied the gathered court, trying to identify potential allies and enemies. Elria had briefed him on a few key figures, those she trusted, those she suspected might be working with Varen, and those whose loyalties were uncertain. Finally, Elria raised a hand, bringing the current discussion to a close. Before we proceed to the next matter, there is an issue of some delicacy I wish to address. Her voice carried easily through the hall without seeming raised. It concerns security within the royal court itself. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, tension rippling through the assembled officials. Varen's posture remained perfect, but Raynor noticed his fingers tighten slightly on the ceremonial staff he held. It has come to my attention, Elria continued, that sensitive information has been transmitted beyond our borders without proper authorization. Information that potentially compromises the safety of the realm and the crown. Murmurs spread through the assembly. Varen stepped forward slightly. Your Majesty, if I may, such a serious matter should perhaps be discussed in a more private setting. I disagree, Counselor, Elria replied, her tone hardening. When the security of all Myrene is at stake, transparency is essential. She gestured, and a guard stepped forward, carrying a small device that Raynor recognized as the data repository from their earlier prep session. This contains evidence of unauthorized communications with the Vaser Dominion spanning the past 5 years. Communications encoded with a very specific quantum signature. Another gesture, and the guard activated the device. A holographic display appeared in the center of the hall, showing the communication logs they had recovered, now partially decoded thanks to the scan of Varen's encryption module. Communications, Elria continued, traced directly to a source within this court. Communications that coincide with security breaches, intelligence leaks, and, most disturbing of all, the timing of the attack that claimed the lives of my parents. The hall had gone completely silent. All eyes were fixed either on the display or on Elria herself, all except Raynor's, which remained focused on Varen. The counselor's composure was remarkable. His expression showed only appropriate concern and confusion, with perhaps a hint of offense at the implication. Your Majesty, these allegations are extremely serious. If there is indeed a traitor among us, they must be identified and punished. But I fail to see how these fragmentary logs constitute evidence against any specific individual. An excellent point, Counselor, Elria acknowledged, which is why we have taken the additional step of analyzing the quantum signature of the encryption module used for these transmissions. She nodded to Raynor, who stepped forward with the scanner from his sleeve, now held openly. The beauty of quantum encryption, he explained to the silent assembly, is its uniqueness. No two modules generate identical patterns. It's like a fingerprint, impossible to fake, impossible to hide. He activated the scanner, projecting its results alongside the communication logs. The patterns matched perfectly. This signature, Raynor continued, matches the encryption module currently in Counselor Varen's possession. The same module used to send information about the Queen's security detail to Vaser operatives. The same module used to coordinate the interference with the historical archives. The same module that transmitted the flight plan of the royal shuttle before it exploded 5 years ago. The stillness that had gripped the hall shattered. Officials turned to one another in shock and disbelief. Guards shifted uncertainly, looking between Elria and Varen. For a moment, Varen maintained his facade of innocence. Then, seeing the evidence displayed for all to witness, his expression changed, the mask of respectful counselor falling away to reveal cold calculation. You understand nothing, he said, his voice cutting through the growing chaos. The Myrene Dominion has grown weak under your family's rule, Your Majesty. The alliance with Vaser offers the only path to survival in an increasingly hostile galaxy. En alliance, Elria rose from her throne, anger visible beneath her controlled exterior. Is that what you call the assassination of my parents? The attempt on my life as a child? Betraying state secrets to our oldest enemy? Necessary sacrifices Varen replied without remorse. The old order must give way to the new. The Vaesir recognized this truth decades ago, that our civilizations must unite or perish separately. Unite under their control, you mean? Elrias said, with you conveniently positioned as their appointed regent. Varen didn't deny it. His gaze swept the assembly, seeking support among the shocked faces of the court. Many here understand the wisdom of this path, even if they lack the courage to speak it aloud. The time for half measures and diplomatic niceties is past. To Raynor's alarm, several officials moved to stand near Varen. Not many, perhaps a dozen out of hundreds, but enough to show the conspiracy extended beyond one ambitious counselor. Guards, Elria commanded, her voice ringing with authority. Arrest Counselor Varen and his conspirators for high treason against the crown and people of Myrene. The guards moved forward, but Varen raised his ceremonial staff, which, Raynor realized too late, was not merely ceremonial. A pulse of energy erupted from it, knocking the approaching guards backward. I had hoped to avoid this particular contingency, Varen said calmly, as though discussing a minor change of plans rather than open rebellion. But adaptability has always been my strength. He tapped a sequence on his wrist device, and the lights throughout the hall flickered. A signal to my Vaesir allies, he explained. They'll be receiving our guests shortly. Elria's expression hardened further. You've compromised our security systems. Of course, Varen agreed. Did you think decades of service gave me access to nothing of value? The Vaesir fleet will be entering our space momentarily, with all defense systems conveniently disabled. Raynor had heard enough. While Varen was focused on Elria, he moved, not toward the counselor, but toward the nearest control panel embedded in one of the crystal pillars. His time studying Myrene technology might have been brief, but he recognized an emergency override when he saw one. Hey, counselor, he called out, drawing Varen's attention. You forgot something important about adaptability. His fingers flew across the panel, inputting the emergency sequence Elria had shown him earlier, just in case. It works both ways. The hall's lighting shifted to a pulsing red as alarms began to sound throughout the citadel. Not the controlled, subtle alerts Raynor had heard before, but a full emergency protocol that bypassed the compromised standard systems. Secondary security grid activated, announced an automated voice. Emergency protocols engaged. All sections sealed. Varen's confidence faltered visibly. Impossible. I disabled all security systems. All the ones you knew about, Elria corrected, a fierce smile appearing on her face. The royal bloodline has maintained certain contingencies that do not appear in any official record. The guards who had been thrown back by Varen's weapon were regrouping, joined by others responding to the emergency alert. Varen and his conspirators found themselves rapidly surrounded, their momentary advantage evaporating. It's over, Varen, Elrias said, descending from the throne dais to stand before him. Your Vaesir allies will find our defenses very much operational, and now they will encounter a fully alerted military rather than the unsuspecting target you promised them. Varen's expression twisted with fury and disbelief. His gaze shot to Raynor, who offered a mocking salute in return. This, outsider, Varen spat. This nobody. You risked everything on him. Not a nobody, Elria replied calmly. The one who saved me when your first assassination attempt failed. A debt long overdue for repayment, it seems. Seeing no escape, Varen made one final, desperate move, lunging not at the guards but directly at Elria. His staff raised a strike. Raynor reacted instinctively, throwing himself forward to intercept. The collision was jarring, sending both men crashing to the floor. Varen's staff discharged wildly, blasting a hole in one of the ornate pillars. Marble dust and crystal shards rained down as Raynor grappled with the counselor, desperately trying to wrench the weapon from his grasp. Despite his age, Varen was surprisingly strong, enhanced perhaps by whatever technology powered his staff. He drove an elbow into Raynor's ribs with bruising force, nearly breaking his grip. Enough! Elria's voice cut through their struggle. She stood over them, her own weapon, A more elegant, but no less deadly version of the guard's arms, pointed directly at Varen's head. Release him, counselor, or the Vaser will need to find another puppet. Varen went still, rage and calculation warring in his expression. Finally, he released his grip on both Raynor and the staff. This changes nothing, he said as guards moved in to secure him. The alliance is inevitable. The Vaser will not be deterred by one setback. Perhaps, Elria acknowledged, but they will need to find another path to it, one that doesn't involve treachery and assassination. She nodded to the guards. Take him and his collaborators to the secure detention level. Full isolation protocols. As Varen was led away, still defiant, the immediate crisis appeared contained. Officials who had not been part of the conspiracy were already coordinating with security forces to address the potential Vaser incursion. Elria moved through the assembly, issuing orders with calm efficiency. Every inch the queen in command of her realm. Raynor, nursing what felt like several bruised ribs, found himself somewhat at loose ends now that the confrontation had concluded. He moved to the side of the hall, content to observe as Elria masterfully reasserted control over her court. A medical attendant approached, offering treatment for his injuries. As they worked, he watched Elria across the hall, struck by the transformation he'd witnessed, from the guarded figure he'd met in a backwater cantina to the commanding sovereign before him now. And somewhere behind both those personas was a child he'd once carried to safety, forming a connection neither of them had recognized until today. Quite a first impression on the court, came a voice beside him. Elria had appeared while he was lost in thought, momentarily free from the immediate demands of the crisis. Not exactly how I planned to spend my day when I woke up this morning, Raynor admitted with a wince as the medical attendant applied something to his ribs. But definitely memorable. You have my gratitude, Elria said, her formal tone softened by genuine warmth. Both for today and for long ago. About that, Raynor said, suddenly awkward. It's strange, isn't it, that we would meet again like this, after all this time? Perhaps not so strange, Elria replied thoughtfully. The universe has patterns we don't always perceive until we step back far enough to see them. A guard approached, bowing deeply. Your Majesty, Defense Command, reports the Vaser vessels have withdrawn from our space. It appears they received some communication that caused them to abort their approach. Varen had a contingency signal, Elria surmised. When he realized his plan had failed, he must have triggered it. She nodded to the guard. Maintain alert status nonetheless. The Vaser are nothing if not adaptive. As the guard withdrew, Elria turned back to Raynor. The immediate danger appears to have passed, but much remains to be done. Varen's network must be fully uncovered, security systems verified, diplomatic channels reassessed. Sounds like you have your work cut out for you, Raynor observed. Indeed, Elria studied him for a moment. Your ship repairs should be complete by now. You're free to continue your journey whenever you wish. Raynor found himself surprisingly reluctant at the thought. Actually, I was thinking you might need someone with an outsider's perspective while you're sorting through all this. Someone not tangled in court politics who can spot things others might miss. A smile touched Elria's lips. Are you offering your services, Raynor? I was under the impression you avoided political entanglements at all costs. I make exceptions for royalty who've saved my life, he replied with a grin. Or, I guess technically, royalty whose lives I've saved. The arrangement seems to work either way. In that case, Elria said, her smile widening, I believe we can find a suitable position for you. Perhaps external security consultant could become more than a convenient cover. A chime from a nearby communication panel interrupted them. Elria checked it, her expression growing more serious. I'm needed in the command center. We'll speak more later. As she turned to leave, Raynor called after her. One condition, though. Elria paused, raising an eyebrow. You're negotiating terms with the Queen? Just one small request, Raynor said, his expression completely serious. The finest toaster in the galaxy installed in my quarters. The universe is vast and full of wonders, but what's it all worth without proper toast? For a moment, Elria stared at him in disbelief. Then, to the visible shock of several nearby courtiers, she laughed. A genuine, unrestrained sound that echoed through the formal hall. "Consider it done," she said, composing herself though amusement still danced in her eyes. "The Royal Engineers will be baffled by the assignment, but I'm sure they'll rise to the challenge." "That's all I ask," Rayner replied with an exaggerated bow that made his ribs protest. As Elria departed, surrounded by officials urgently seeking her attention, Rayner gazed around the grand hall, still hardly believing the turn his life had taken in less than a day. From crash-landed traitor to royal advisor, from forgotten childhood hero to whatever came next, he moved to one of the enormous windows, looking out at the stars surrounding the citadel. The same stars he'd spent his life wandering among, never staying in one place long enough to form connections. Now perhaps that would change. A royal attendant approached, bowing respectfully. "Sir, your quarters have been prepared. If you would follow me." "Lead the way," Rayner replied, taking one last look at the stars before turning to follow. "I have a feeling this is just the beginning." And somewhere in the vast complex of the Citadel, a team of very confused royal engineers was about to receive the most peculiar request in the history of the Myrene Crown: specifications for the galaxy's most advanced toasting device by royal decree. Some things, it seemed, were universal constants: dangers averted, conspiracies exposed, lives saved. And toast. Definitely toast.